Hi everyone, today's podcast is on Medea. And I'm going to start with the children who have been used in a distinctly Euripidean sense. In this play, they have speaking roles which doesn't normally occur, and it's this speaking role that's critical because it pushes us and it pushed the audience at the time to confront what was distinctly horrifying. And it's the idea that children can be an object of vengeance. Throughout this play, Medea occupies a masculine space. Euripides gives Medea two aspects that she seems to get away with. She has committed murder in cold blood, and there's murder that she's essentially got away with. She was living in a patriarchal society, which is a society where women have no place. The other issue was that she was living in an Athenian society which was brutally xenophobic, and as a foreigner, she also had no place. Our society is obviously becoming increasingly xenophobic, which is a concern for people, so you can imagine how Medea may have felt living in this society. The laws that she lived in were Athenian societal laws, and if you are not a citizen, well, you aren't a citizen unless you can prove that both your parents are Athenian. So obviously Medea and Jason had a unique problem. Neither of them were going to be citizens, and neither were their sons. And it was Jason who had a bigger problem with that. Medea, as a barbarian, has, I guess, what we could call an excuse. But she does feel alienated and isolated by these new laws and customs, because the way she behaves, the killing, the witchcraft type thing, the chants, the incantations, the poisons, they were normal to her, and they were considered normal to her and her family until she had moved to Athens. She now has to behave in a way that people would see as normal, and she needs to adhere to the rules of society to be a good Athenian wife, a good Greek wife, and to live in Corinth, where people are scared of her. The idea is that Euripides in this play subverts all expectations. The Athenian audience is subverted when Medea kills, and Medea's extraordinary appearance at the end of the play. She becomes godlike, and they don't comprehend that. No other character in Greek mythology up to this time has the place occupied by the deus ex machina. This position is usually reserved for deities, and now suddenly Medea is in that position. Other characters have been promised this position or given this position off stage, but Medea is the first character to be given this position on stage. She's occupying the deus ex machina, and this is unique. This is important. The play itself is marked by duality. It is both affirming and subverting ideas that were present in Athenian culture and society. You need to understand that Medea, actually physically occupying the position on stage reserved for this deity in the position of deus ex machina, subverts all expectations. And throughout the whole play, she is fighting the human versus the godly. A lot of the play is fighting rationality, trying to demonstrate sophrosony. Medea is sitting in a nexus of divine versus human. Is she a divine being in a human world, and therefore she can do what she wants? Or is she a human who's committed a crime and should be damned and punished for the remainder of her life? The Athenians had a deep fear of her, and they had a deep fear of everything that she stood for. You need to understand their particular religious belief was in the idea of Zeus, the ultimate god, and his two sons, Apollo and Dionysius. They would often have festivals where they would recreate the chaos of the end of the world, which was in a week-long drinking and drug-fueled fest. And it was a festival to the Greek god Dionysus. In Greek mythology, Apollo and Dionysus are both sons of Zeus. Apollo is the god of reason and rational thinking, while Dionysus is the god of irrational thought and chaos, and appeals to emotions and instincts. The Greeks did not consider the two gods to be opposites or rivals, although often the two deities were entwined by nature. They saw them as a dichotomy, as two parts of the same entity. And it's important that you understand they saw them as two parts of the same entity. And what Euripides did, he would present the divine as an amoral force that you cannot rely on. The Athenians saw life as fundamentally tenuous and could be cut at any moment. And the gods were the ones in control of this. And there was always that dichotomy happening in their world. Medea should have been punished, and she is not punished. However, she has actually announced what her punishment will be, that she will cry for the rest of her days and she will mourn her children. What you need to understand is the Athenians would have seen the gods, as acting capriciously by not punishing her. They wouldn't have understood why they can make such rash decisions and change what they actually see as good or bad on a sort of whimsical manner. The gods were petty, they were capricious, and they were mercurial. But they were also responsible for the establishment of order. The logical order and reasoning of seasons and nature was attributed to the gods. But the unpredictable life was also attributed to the gods. So, two halves of the same entity. In their world, crime is punished forever. You are punished for your crimes, as are your children punished. And in this play, Euripides dashes this notion. What the men expected does not happen, and there's no reassurance given to them whatsoever. The audience is left with zero compassion or reassurance to what they've actually seen. You need to think in this play, is there a hierarchy of sins? For example, is oath breaking a worse or greater sin or not than killing your children? Hers is clearly on top, but she is not punished. Those who break oaths are punished, and oaths are administered by Zeus. Women traditionally cannot utter an oath. Even in marriage, they do not have the agency for it. Then why is Medea able to make oaths? Medea, a woman, is extremely marginalised, and she's utterly marginalised, and she's expected to sacrifice everything to produce a male. She is a bodily slave who is expected to buy her own slavery. Women had no power to administer oaths, and when Medea demands that Zeus honour oaths, she moves into a male space. In Athenian times, the inside was seen as a woman's space and the outside as a male space. The good Athenian wife would not be leaving the home, although a good Athenian or Corinthian would also be speaking to their neighbours. It was this very difficult conundrum that women would have faced, which is why Medea would have been nervous with the Corinthian women coming, because she had not spoken to them previously, but now she was outside in the male domain, as were they. And the whole play takes place either inside the house where you hear them on the outside, or they bring the action to the outside into the male space. And Medea occupies a space traditionally seen as a male space. She describes herself in these particular masculine terms. And because of all this, and because of her taking up residence outside, Jason looks remarkably weak. And he starts to argue like a sophist, someone who essentially is arguing full of rhetoric and good ideas, but has no meat behind it. He has distinctly Machiavellian qualities, quite arrogant. Euripides' audience expected males to be in charge, and Jason was not in charge. The other structural element in the play is clearly divided into two halves, before Aegeus and after Aegeus' entry into the action. Before Aegeus, people come and go in the play and in the action due to external forces. They are sent there by something else. Some other reason makes them go and be part of the play. But after Aegeus' action and discussions with Medea, all the action from this point onwards is controlled by Medea. What you need to understand is the chorus in this play is the introduction of reason and intellect. It is there to balance the passion that is shown by both Jason and Medea. Medea also has intellect, which is seen or different to how Jason has been presented as someone essentially who's full of hot air and rhetoric and no clear intellect. However, he does see himself as being full of intellect, and the audience at the time would have seen him that way too. So Medea is proud of her intellect. She sees her actions as regrettable, but as inevitable. And the chorus wrestles with this decision as any society would. It's this idea of reason versus passion. And reason versus passion is pathos. Pathos being not something that you do, but it is something that is done to you. You lack the control when you're passionate, and the fear of this lack of control is what the Athenians had. The chorus can see the inevitable. They want to deny that this inevitable act, the death of the children, will happen. They can see it coming, but they cannot stop it. This is pathos. It cannot be stopped. And it really hurts you. It hits you. It smacks you in the face. That is pathos. When Medea wrestles with what she must do, this is a key speech in the play. She is trying to assert that she has some sort of power. The chorus women having been played by men, it's interesting now that the chorus move in and out of the play as necessary to expand on a particular, on the idea of society in which Medea is a part of. And they're making those comments. The chorus ultimately sides with the children. They are not siding with Jason, and you need to be aware of that particular decision. They are on the side of the children. The other thing you need to be aware of is this play was written when Euripides was still innovating and mucking around with his ideas of the rules of this particular play. This play is an evolving form in the context of a society that was also innovating and developing at a rapid pace, but who saw itself as the bastion of democracy. Some people say that Euripides pushed his audiences too far with his play and with his structures, and he pushed the model that he introduced with Medea in future plays. You might find it helpful to see the chorus as a bit like the Medea, when it just shows you what is happening. And if you're watching a particular event, let's say a car chase, you can see that a crash is going to happen. You can see that somebody's going to get hurt, and you can comment and say that shouldn't happen. The media might even have a narrator saying that shouldn't happen. Oh, look at this. But at the end of the day, they can do nothing about it. So you need to see that their comments are there, but there's no active intervention. And what they say does influence not the characters in the play, but their influence, the chorus's influence, is really on the audience. They are a bridge, and they help the audience to rethink where their ideas might sit in society, remembering that the audience is entirely male at this particular point in time. The chorus acts as a mediator between the characters and the audience. What you need to remember is this play is solely for Dionysus. Dionysus did what he wants, when he wanted, and to whom he wanted to do it to. This influenced how Euripides presented the gods. And you need to understand that the Athenians saw the gods as not operating within the human rules. The plays honour Dionysus by representing the nature of reality. In a human environment, there are rules, but fundamentally, in a broader and cosmic environment, these rules can be usurped. All other mothers in Greek tragedies who have killed their children were given an out, a reason. They were mad. They did stupid things. They didn't know what they were doing. They were controlled by some other beast, some wild thing. Medea is different. She is rational. She is fully in charge of her senses here, and the audience doesn't cope with that. When Medea kills, she is not governed by passion. She is in control of it. It is horrible what is about to happen, but it makes sense. And what she says at one point is, my passion is the master of my reason. And it sounds like she's saying that she's been ruled by her passion. But what she's actually asking is my passion the master of my reason, or is it not? And she's referring to the passion there, but she's actually saying these words. She's having a conversation with herself to understand the relationship between her passion and her reason, her pathos. She's trying to determine, is the passion the master of her reason? And she comes to the conclusion that no, passion does not guide me. It is my reason in this sense. And I must seek to understand, she has to seek to understand herself and her actions, and that conversation is where she understands her actions. She's listened to herself and she sees that she must act because it is not her passion that is guiding this particular thought process or action. It is her reason. Medea knows exactly what she's doing. She's in full control and she's manipulating everybody in that. If the audience sees any passion, it is because Medea wants them to see it. Okay, it's not an accidental thing. Once again, we come back to the dichotomy of passion, the dichotomy of passion versus reason, and the dichotomy represented by the two sons of Zeus. Athenians were proudly imposing reason and order in their world. They were saying, we are the ones who are able to put in place this particular democracy. We are ruling the world. We are making up rules. We are making up order, and everybody has to come under this wing. And Euripides pretty much said, no, have a think about what you're really doing there. Maybe that's not really happening. The Athenians were thinking without their imposed reason and order, there would be chaos. But the reality was that the real world was a tenuous veneer. It was something, a glossy cover, hiding the chaos that was really there. Corinth was seen as the bastion of civilization order, but if you actually looked closely, it was closely governed by passion, and we see that in the actions of both Jason and Medea. It was sort of like a war between what I feel and what I feel is occurring and what should occur. Medea humanizes this civilization's paradigm of pathos versus imposed reason. The fact that reason seems to be the driving force behind the murder is disconcerting to the audience, and they're unsure why that's occurring. Jason, according to the audience, was acting within the rules of his society and had done absolutely nothing wrong. Even if we in modern society see him in a negative way, that particular society would not have seen it at all. What Jason was doing in marrying Glauce was securing the longevity of his family. According to the rules of society, he was right, and he had every right to do what he did. Jason conforms to all societal expectations and at all times until he wants to hold his children after their death. When he wants to hold his children, it is at this particular time that he is no longer abiding by societal rules. He is almost cartoonish in his stereotypical following of the gender roles allocated to men and to heroes. When he wants to touch his children, finally humanity comes to him. He finally sees his children as humans, not as his sons in the role that society has given them. He finally sees them as humans that he has invested love in and not a status in. Euripides has made the children more human with their dialogue, and that's why their dialogue is important. The way in which Medea characterizes marriage as a cage that she willingly entered, but it's because she had no choice. So you think about the difficulty of entering a particular prison or a cage that you see as you having to do that, but there's no choice. And if you had a choice, you wouldn't, but there is no choice. Women in this particular time are completely subject to the man and is completely powerless. And while this particular story is about gods, it is essentially a human story. Medea is semi-divine. And the audience at the time would not have been able to handle the truth of the human condition without her being semi-divine, or possibly with another out, the fact that she was the foreigner. once again referring to that idea of the feelings of alienation. The audience was looking for catharsis and a purification of emotion, and it did not occur. It leaves the audience with nothing but their own questions of the human condition and what their society was going to be causing, producing, having occur within its realms. How do you think that audience felt when leaving? You need to be very self-consciously aware of Athenian society. For Euripides, it is about what happens in society when people are exiled. They behave in a manner that was caused by society, and this particular society had set itself up to be the best example of something, and he was actually questioning that. Euripides is offering a comment on the gendered nature of society, and there's a lot of discussion on the hypocrisy of the people who see themselves as civilized as well. So it's a gendered society and a society who saw themselves as civilized and very democratic, and he is actually showing this to be very hypocritical. Some interpretations of the text are not as well supported as others. So just saying that Jason is a poor man who's been attacked by a devilish woman will not be as supported as other interpretations of this play. You need to remember that Euripides presents a complex picture of society within the context of a known story. The struggle between women who were marginalised but were ultimately responsible for the ongoing development of the future society. So they were marginalised, they were subjugated, they were seen as second-class citizens, but they were the only way forward in the future society still occurring, because they were the only way for future society to be born. With that, there were rules and expectations for these women, and what would a good Athenian woman have done? Medea didn't do it. A good Athenian woman would have accepted exile. So you've got to keep thinking to yourself, you need to understand the text as it was performed or understood at the time. And the audience would have already been shocked in those opening scenes when it was clear that Medea was not accepting her exile, and she was beginning to plot how she could avoid it. This play brings their myths into the human realm of understanding. You need to understand the play in the context that the audience to which it was presented lived in. So avoid those simplistic interpretations where Medea is bad and Jason is nice. You need to think about the fact that within their marriage, they both did love and sacrifice for each other. And the changes that happened, however, not because of what Medea wanted, but because of what Jason wanted and because of what society wanted. And part of what Jason wanted was forced upon him because of societal rules, going back to the idea of would he have been a citizen. Therefore, it's really important to understand that gender has consequences for all. Men are also operating in a realm that is constraining. Jason is also operating within a series of constraints over which he has no control. The audience is forced to reassess what they are expecting in their world and what they believed to be true. Critical to this reassessment is Medea's assumption to the deus ex machina. If we think about the nurse's prologue, which is reciting of the known story, it lulls them into a false sense of security. Jason is fully accepted by society as a hero and as a man. However, we as an audience see him through the prism of Medea and Medea's eyes. Jason presents very well to society. On paper, he looks really good. He sounds really good. He ticks all the boxes. But when he's really in the position of being the hero for their society, he doesn't do very well at it. Euripides is not as deeply interested in Jason's thinking as he is with Medea's thinking. You also need to understand the chorus is actually happy with Creon and Glauce being killed and Jason being significantly hurt because those characters are morally reprehensible. The chorus does not normally comment. This is a change of women now observing women, and this is not expected, and this change, this subversion, is difficult for the audience. Euripides makes radical changes to the characterization and had to balance these with the structures of his play. He creates a space that is neither masculine or feminine and neither divine or human. The ambiguity of this forces the audience to reflect on the nature of humanity in a tightly controlled environment. Their expectations defy many things. They defy, in his play, it defies what the gods should have done and defies what women should do. Medea was accepted by the very forces that define society, and she had committed crimes that shouldn't have been accepted at all. This hurts the audience because they can't ignore her now, and they can't justify that what happened only occurred because she was a foreigner. So the fact that the gods accept her at the end forces the audience to look at their own behaviour and not disregard her behaviour as being attributable to the fact that she was a foreigner or the fact that she was a woman. Jason's actions, we remind you, were correct as defined by society's constructs. But we can be sympathetic to Medea but also be repelled. We accept that humans can do the abhorrent, and she did the abhorrent.